Last month, I sold $2 million worth of equipment to a major company. There's no way Kevin could handle a job involving that kind of money. It's frustrating dealing with Thomas. It's like wrestling with someone who won't listen. I've given up trying to reason with him. But then I heard that Thomas got engaged. His fiancée, Anna, is a beauty who could compete in pageants and was the talk of the university. I never thought I'd meet her again as my sister-in-law. Since that day, Thomas has been smitten with Anna and has been giving me a hard time. After the tragic accident that took his first son's life, he came up with something outrageous. "I'm going to marry a widow, Anna. I'm going to divorce you. So get out." "Fine. Here's the divorce papers," I said. I didn't hesitate to write them. "This is my one-way ticket back to my life, and I have to file it myself. I'm Mirabelle Smith, and I'm turning 35 this year. This all happened before I got married. I worked at my father's company and planned to leave once I figured out what I wanted to do. Until then, it was a good place to learn the basics, as my father suggested. Everyone knew I was the boss's daughter and kept their distance. Even after being there for a while, my relationships with colleagues didn't improve. I was always just the boss's daughter. I sometimes regretted joining my father's company so casually because I didn't need to job hunt. I wished I had taken job hunting more seriously. Then someone who blew away all my regrets appeared. "I'm Thomas, new to the company. I still have a lot to learn, but I'm looking forward to working with you." I never imagined that Thomas, who had just joined, would become my husband one day. Right after Thomas joined, I was having lunch alone at my desk during the break. "You're not going out to lunch with everyone, Mirabelle?" "No, I brought my own lunch." "Really? Your lunch looks tasty, Mirabelle." "It's nothing, just leftovers in a Tupperware," I replied, looking back. I think about how awful I used to be at talking to people, but Thomas spoke to me in a way that blew away my uneasiness. "I'm hopeless with household chores, so I really respect that you can manage them. Also, the orientation manual you created was really easy to read. It shows your attention to detail." For the first time, I felt like someone at the company really saw me. "Thank you, I'm glad you said that." "I'm glad too." You finally smiled. That conversation was a turning point, and I started talking more with Thomas. I've encountered countless fleeting relationships in this job, but there was something special about Thomas that set him apart. Moments that click in life aren't frequent, but I was sure of it. I might just marry this man, I thought, as Thomas and I grew closer despite our busy work schedules. Seeing his smile and earnestness made me want to be by his side. Marry me despite all my flaws. Yes, gladly. Dating someone you truly love and getting married was surprising even to me. Back then, Thomas had just joined the company, but he quickly stood out with his pleasant demeanor and precision in his work. One day, I overheard a conversation in the break room that shocked me. Thomas was confidently telling a colleague, "I'll earn big and provide for you, Mirabelle. I want you to be a stay-at-home wife." At that moment, I felt an unpleasant premonition, but I couldn't just break off our engagement over that alone. I could have walked away and pretended I didn't hear it, but I wanted to know Thomas's true intentions. So I showed my face and said, "Thanks, but don't overdo it." Thomas then looked at his colleague with an expression that seemed to say, "See what I mean? A woman who quietly walks 3 steps behind her man is just right for me." Not long after this incident, I handed in my resignation and became a full-time housewife. I might be biased, but Thomas is passionate about his work and seems to have the skills to take over the company in the future. He was kind to me, so I believed we would live happily together and grow old. However, that expectation was shattered all too easily. Thomas changed once we got married, quickly showing his true colors. Now that I'm a full-time housewife, he probably thinks I can't escape. Thomas leaves everything undone, ever thinking to do housework on his own. He leaves food where he ate, doesn't clean up, and won't tidy the areas he dirties. If I look away for a moment, The room I just cleaned gets dirty again. If I leave it, he scolds me for the mess. When Thomas is home, I have to follow him around as the house quickly becomes a disaster with no space to even step. "Hey, could you at least wipe up the places you've dirtied?" I asked. Thomas snapped back. "Why? That's your job as a housewife, isn't it? Don't you see I'm deliberately not doing it to avoid taking your job?" "That's ridiculous. I'm doing this for you, for your growth. Don't you see how dismissive that is?" Thomas sighed heavily and let out the last thing I wanted to hear. "I married you because you were the boss's daughter, but I didn't expect you to be this troublesome." The only person who had freed me from the curse of being the boss's daughter was Thomas, and I felt betrayed by him. "So, if I weren't the boss's daughter, you wouldn't have married me?" I asked. Thomas replied with a click of his tongue. "I had to get married for credibility with clients, given my age. Plus, marrying the boss's daughter is bound to be advantageous in the future." He forced me to cut off the conversation and walked away. Lately, it bothers me how Thomas has to dominate every conversation, looking down on others as if they are beneath him. He's especially harsh towards his own brother, Kevin, always trying to prove he's better. Kevin has been involved in mechanical research and development since graduating from grad school, so they're not even on the same playing field. Kevin is just a bookworm. I would never want to be like that. It's uncool and lame, Thomas often says, perhaps out of an inferiority complex, emphasizing how he's superior in the corporate world. I sold $2 million worth of equipment to a major company last month. Kevin, always stuck in his numbers, couldn't handle a job involving that kind of money. I'm sick of Thomas always comparing himself to Kevin, boasting about his own superiority. Then one day at the age of 45, Kevin got engaged. The couple, who met through an acquaintance, hit it off and quickly decided to marry. We were invited to meet the bride's family as Kevin's brother and sister-in-law. "Kevin is getting married? That can't be true. She must be nothing special," Thomas grimaced when he heard the news. "Getting married now. He must have just thrown money at some young woman because he's scared of being alone." It's hard to know how to respond when such strong disdain is openly displayed between brothers, but we decided to go to the meeting anyway since it was a special occasion. When we saw Kevin's bride-to-be, Thomas was at a loss for words. "Wow, seriously, she's as beautiful as Mirabelle and the same age." Thomas was speechless at the bride's beauty, and so was I. Anna turned out to be someone we both knew from university, where we were in the same major. She was always a standout, participating in beauty pageants and often approached by people on the street. I never thought we'd meet again after all these years, and I was surprised for a different reason than Thomas. Kevin's smile said it all. He was thrilled to be marrying Anna. At the beginning of the meeting, there were signs of nervousness, but gradually, smiles that couldn't be hidden started to overflow. However, as the meeting progressed, one person's expression clouded over, unable to feel happy. "How did Kevin get such a beauty?" "That's impossible," Thomas muttered. After returning home, Thomas, irritated and alone, threw a box of tissues. "Well, they were attracted to each other when they were introduced, weren't they? Why would a plain bookworm like him get to marry such a beauty at this timing?" "I don't know that, and she has been in beauty contests and even on TV, you know." I was thinking how Anna's beauty and fame had not faded when Thomas's frustration turned towards me. "I married you because you were the boss's daughter, but what a letdown. I rushed into a bad deal." "What is that supposed to mean? Isn't your only asset being the boss's daughter?" I felt like crying from his harsh words and attitude, but held it back. It must have been about half a year since we attended that joyful wedding when I received the news that Kevin had suddenly passed away. Apparently, it was an accident on his way home. It's a situation often seen in dramas or novels, but it feels unbearable when it happens to someone close. Just after attending his wedding, now it's his funeral. What about Kevin's funeral? Think you can make it? I expected more complaints, but Thomas's response was surprisingly different. Since it's the last time, I guess I'll go pay my respects. Plus, I'm worried about Anna. Thomas seems restless, looking around like a child during a school open day. Hey, what's up? You seem restless. No reason. Come to think of it, I started to notice something was off with Thomas right after Kevin got married. At first, it was just a slight unease. Women's fashion brands and trendy cosmetics started popping up in conversations. Recently, he's been wearing branded items and even perfumes he never used before. Hey, what's up with you lately? It's none of your business. A man needs to keep up his appearance. I get that grooming is important, but what's this receipt about? I showed Thomas the shopping receipt. All this shopping, restaurants, jewelry, sweets. What's the deal? Why are you snooping around? Just stop it. You leave it out in the entrance for all to see and then say not to look. So, can I ask what this is about? Thomas started to fumble for an excuse. Look, it's for entertaining clients. You know, I thought I'd make an early investment for the future. I couldn't conclude anything yet and didn't want to dig myself into a hole. I decided to let him play his hand a little longer since I needed to gather more evidence. Unaware or not of how I felt, Thomas began to hurl terrible words at me. Hey, what's with your look these days? What? Is something wrong? I've always thought you didn't stand out, but now your belly is starting to sag. You're nothing like Kevin's wife. Thomas had a look of satisfaction, as if he got one over on me. It's the truth, right? Are you pouting because I hit the nail on the head? Being a homemaker doesn't mean you should let yourself go. Despite this, I had admired him when we met and felt joy at being able to marry him. I never dreamed I would be the one to suggest a breakup, but it seemed Thomas had his own thoughts. One day, as I stood up to bring in the laundry, our doorbell rang at an unusual time. It was 5:00 p.m., way too early for Thomas to be home from work. Welcome home. You're early today, I said, opening the front door, surprised to see him. It didn't take long to notice something was off. Are you going out somewhere? What about dinner? Thomas's expression was different from usual. Before I knew it, he had a piece of paper in front of me. Sign this, he said. Realizing he was presenting me with divorce papers, I spoke up. A divorce? What happened? Is something wrong? Thomas sneered. I'm going to marry the widow Anna. You need to get divorced and leave. I was taken aback. I never dreamed Thomas would drive me out. He waved his hand dismissively, shooing me away like a dog. You're just in the way if you keep standing there, he said, trying to enter the house. I grabbed his arm. Fine, I said, and without hesitation, I signed the divorce papers. Thomas insisted on marrying Kevin's widow. I saw no reason to stop him. Once Thomas sets his mind on something, he's stubbornly inflexible. You file it. I'm busy. Okay, got it. I'll take care of it. With a determined look, Thomas said something outrageous. I'm going to remarry Anna and make her happy. I'm confident I can make her happier than Kevin ever could. You can manage on your own, but Anna can't. Well, maybe if that's what you think. I was tired of the hassle and just nodded along nonchalantly. I didn't have many belongings to begin with. Who would have thought that not being materialistic would come in handy like this? Is this really happening? Am I the one who has to leave? Of course. Why should I, the head of the Smith family, be the one to leave? I was shocked he was still saying such things. At the same time, I realized that nothing I said would get through to Thomas anymore, so I made my decision. The furniture arrives tomorrow, and I've cleared out the nuisance. Now everything's set for Anna to move in. It's going to be busy. Thomas was humming a tune and dancing around, ignoring me. I quickly left the house and returned to my parents' house for the first time in years. I had been living as a homemaker just as Thomas wanted. I decided to stay with my parents for a while to figure out how I would live moving forward. They were initially surprised but warmly welcomed me, accepting my decision, for which I am truly grateful. I thought I might as well try the popular work-from-home trend, and it surprisingly suited me well. I could work at my own pace and in my favorite place without dealing with annoying workplace politics. Here, I'm not the president's daughter. I'm just a freelancer. I feel fortunate to have discovered work from home due to my divorce. One day I went out to a cafe in the city for a change of scenery. The cafe, known for its beautiful view, is one of my favorites. It's quite busy on weekends, but today, being a weekday, it wasn't too crowded. In the quiet, I was relaxing, reading a book, and listening to music when I heard voices arguing. It was 4:00 p.m. on a weekday, a typically peaceful time. I lifted my head, wondering what was happening. I recognized the faces and heard the exchange, though I wished I hadn't. It gave me a headache. Today I've come prepared to make you happy. Forget about Kevin and be happy with me. Will you marry me? Thomas was proposing to Anna, holding out a ring. I never expected to witness Thomas proposing to Anna. Surprised by the sudden event, I hid my face behind the magazine. I watched, holding my breath. Anna stared at the ring box and finally spoke. Me and Thomas, she said with an innocent smile, lightly waving her hand and laughing. She took the ring box, opened it, and said, "Oh, I thought you might feel this way about me. I had a suspicion, but really." She took the ring out of the box and held it up to the light. "Do you think I'm the type of woman who suits this luxury brand?" "Of course, Anna. You're beautiful, and Kevin was not worthy of you. Forget about him and be with me, won't you?" Anna quietly placed the ring box next to her coffee. "Is this ring secondhand? You put it in a branded box, thinking I wouldn't notice. Do you think I don't know anything?" "No, that's not it. I just wanted to protect your smile. That's why I got divorced." Anna sighed softly, pointing at the ring. "At first glance, the box seems genuine, but this ring looks like it came from a pawn shop or recycled shop. Did you think I wouldn't notice?" Thomas seemed at a loss for words. Anna continued pressing the point. "Don't underestimate me. First off, the brand of the box and the ring itself don't match. The ring and stone don't fit the rank. You probably bought just the box on some app and picked up the contents from a pawn shop, right?" It seemed I hit the nail on the head as Thomas began to falter. I almost burst out laughing from behind my cover. "What? Why? And most of all, this part is evidence you tried to erase the previous engraving and repurpose it for proposing to me, right? A proposal ring in a luxury brand box, but the contents are secondhand. That's so typical of Thomas, always caring about appearances, but lacking substance." At Anna's words, Thomas stood there speechless, unable to respond. Suddenly, the serious expression on his face turned foolish. "I work in the jewelry industry, so I know a thing or two. Did you really think you could fool me with such a clumsy attempt?" "No way Kevin could have caught a woman like that," Thomas muttered to himself, biting his nails. Anna added insult to injury. "I've been meaning to say this, but you're the one who kept sending gifts unilaterally after I married Kevin. I've told you several times to stop because it was bothersome. Did you think? Was I that kind of woman?" "No, of course not. You think I don't understand anything. That's why you do these things, and that's why I can't come to like you." Suddenly cornered, Thomas became flustered. "But my love is genuine. I love you, Anna, and that's why I wanted to help you." "Help me? I never asked for your help, did I?" Anna looked perplexed. Trying to attract attention with gifts or a man suddenly coming forward saying, "I want to help you," and then opening a box with a ring. "I love you so much I can provide a better life than Kevin could." Despite his self-centered assertions and tears, Anna found them utterly unrelatable. "That's exactly it. Really, it's impossible with you." Thomas started to say something but then covered his mouth with his hand. Thomas, it's always about you. Who wants to live with someone like that? Because I work for a well-known company, I can provide a comfortable life. If you just do a part-time job at the supermarket, that'd be enough, Thomas said. Anna put her hand on her head and sighed heavily. What? Just a part-time job at the supermarket? Or did you prefer being a housewife? Well, that's fine too. Thomas spoke as if making a concession. I hate people who impose their ways on me the most. Kevin never once imposed his ways on me. He was gentle, and he respected me, Anna said. Surprised by Anna's words, Thomas suddenly stood up. I silently watched as the chair clattered and rolled away. Really, it's his broad-mindedness and supportiveness that I loved. That's why I had no doubts about marrying Kevin. And of course, he never interfered with my career after we got married. Anna took the ring in her hand and glared at Thomas. I work here as a jewelry designer, believe it or not, so I can't tolerate how someone like you handles rings. And as a person, you're nothing compared to Kevin. What? You think I'm inferior to Kevin? Thomas had always belittled Kevin. I can do better than him. There's no way he can do something I can't, he'd often boasted. It was clear he looked down on Kevin. When we were dating, I liked Thomas's confident demeanor. But I had begun to realize it was all a facade. He had dragged along his trivial tales of bravery from his student days all this way. He was like the emperor with no clothes. I know how to live my life, and I didn't get married just to have someone make me happy. Do you think women get married because they can't live on their own? What error are you talking about? Who are you looking at when you talk? Because you're not seeing the person right in front of you, Anna said firmly. More than anything, I married because I loved Kevin and wanted to be with him. It hurts to feel that's been insulted. Rejected outright by Anna, Thomas became defensive. What? Who would want a strong-willed woman like you? Damn it, Mirabelle never did things like this. Grumbling, Thomas left the cafe. He passed by me for a moment, and I thought he might notice me, but he left without seeing me. A few days after witnessing that scene between Thomas and Anna, it was about a week since I had presented Thomas with the divorce papers. The phone kept ringing so persistently that the sound seemed to stick in my head. What was his intention in calling? I had been ignoring the calls completely, but finally I decided to check the call log on my smartphone. When I saw Thomas's name all over the history, the scene at the cafe came back to me. Despite the terrible premonition, I decided to answer the call. Hey, are you doing okay? Thomas sounded uneasy. I'm managing, thanks to you. I'm relieved you finally answered. Can we meet for a bit? There's something I really need to say in person. In person? What is it that can't be said over the phone? But Thomas pressed on. Look, I know I've caused you a lot of trouble, Mirabelle. Given his insistence, we agreed to meet at a diner near the station. He appeared worn out, his fatigue evident, wearing a crumpled shirt at 6:00 p.m. He must have come straight from work, but thinking he had been at work in that state made my head ache. As soon as we sat down at the diner, he immediately brought up the divorce papers. So, about those divorce papers from that time, you haven't filed them yet, right? I wasn't surprised by his approach. Thomas is that kind of man. When things go against him, he tries to twist the facts stubbornly, but not everything can be manipulated by his whims anymore. However, Thomas can't accept that. He can only measure things from his own perspective and convenience. Look, Mirabelle, if you want, I'm open to reconciling. You're still holding on to those papers because you're unsure, right? Thomas gestured impatiently, as if to hurry me up, but to me it made no sense. However, I quickly came up with a response. If you're talking about getting back together. That paper? It's nothing but the divorce papers. If it's about the divorce papers, I filed them right after we separated. Yes, I went straight to file them a week ago. What? You didn't have to file them the same day just because I said so. Thomas appeared flustered, but that was none of my concern. Did you forget about the divorce papers you thrust at me, saying you were going to marry Anna? I haven't forgotten. You know, it was the heat of the moment. He tried to pass it off as a joke. You haven't changed at all. At over 30, it's unlikely that a man would change just because he's told to. After being apart from you, Mirabelle, I've realized I can't do without you. You're the only one who truly understands the real me. What are you even saying? I felt nauseous listening to Thomas's self-absorbed rants. Look, it's only been a week, so I haven't told work yet. If we cancel the divorce, we can go back to our old lives. It'll be great for both of us, right? Both of us? What did you just say? So, if we cancel the divorce and go back to living in our old house, it'll be like nothing happened, right? You wouldn't want to trouble the boss, would you? You really don't understand. I sighed deeply and finally told Thomas. Canceling a divorce just doesn't happen. Also, I'm consulting a lawyer about you kicking me out of the house. A lawyer? That's an overreaction for a little misunderstanding. It's you who's mistaken. After your brother disappeared, you tried your moves on Anna. When rejected, you think we can just go back. It's disgusting. I haven't forgotten that you kicked me out. Thomas started sweating profusely. Also, did you forget that the house is mine? My parents gave it to us as a wedding gift in my name. No, I thought this kind of thing usually becomes the man's after marriage. Your lack of sense is beyond words. Regardless, the fact that you kicked me out has really hurt me, and I've asked a lawyer I know to proceed with it. This isn't a threat, but when he realized a lawyer was actually involved, his voice faltered. What are you proceeding with? You'll probably get a notice from a lawyer soon. Isn't it ridiculous to involve a lawyer over something so trivial? Thomas didn't seem to understand how unfavorable his position was. And one more thing, I have this document, I said, handing Thomas an envelope. He opened it, looked inside, then crumpled. You're kidding, right? Inside the envelope was a list of novelty items and supplies that had been stolen from the office. You can't say you don't remember this. Perhaps it was also meant to secure money to buy gifts for Anna. Stop making accusations just because I'm the daughter of the president. You snitch on me. Cut it out, he retorted defensively. I was annoyed by Thomas's reaction, but it was the truth. How could I possibly report on the current office situation when I'm not even there? I don't know who told, but it's clear that it's something you shouldn't do as a professional. Even though I was no longer involved with my father's company and didn't know the exact internal situation, I had noticed my father looking gloomy at home. He must feel betrayed as a father. You still don't understand the position you're in, but I guess with your mindset and common sense, you'll never understand. What do you mean by that? Are you serious? Yes, my parents are also aware of this. They know we're divorced too. Are you just realizing that now? After that, Thomas had nothing to say and hung his head. I didn't want to waste any more time. Without looking back at Thomas's table, I left the diner. In the end, everything about Thomas, from the divorce to other matters, had become completely exposed. My father, who had given the house as a wedding gift in my name, had contacted Thomas. Thomas had left the house quickly due to the awkwardness. Bad news travels fast, and Thomas's misdeeds had spread not just within the company, but also to clients and related companies. The company probably couldn't forgive his actions, left unchecked. Reassigning Thomas to a window-side department was meant to protect the company's reputation. Once seen as a promising employee due to his marriage to the president's daughter, Thomas found himself struggling as a deputy leader in a rural area. He faced constant criticism from leaders and complaints from below, pushing him to his mental limits. Despite his complaints, he kept working because he had no other job prospects and needed to pay alimony. It wasn't my department anymore, so I didn't concern myself with his problems. One day, while waiting near the clock tower at the station, I saw Thomas. Actually, he saw me first and started heading my way, glaring with such intensity that I was terrified and couldn't move. "Hey, you've messed up my life because you were so serious about submitting that divorce paper," he shouted. I couldn't understand what he was saying and just stood there. "Are you listening? Because of you, I ended up in the company's shabby housing and got shifted to field work. It's been horrible. Talk to your dad for me, will you?" He really thought that talking to my father would solve his problems. What a blissfully ignorant mind he had. Just then, I heard the voice of the person I was waiting for. "It's the same story again. I brought the police, so don't worry." Anna, seeing Thomas approaching me menacingly, had called a nearby police officer. "Sorry I'm late." From a distance, I saw that Mirabel was in trouble. "Thank you." If Anna hadn't called the police, I wouldn't have known what to do. I was too scared to move. "Really, thank you." "It's nothing, really. Besides, I wanted to have a proper chat with you, Mirabel, not just as in-laws, but as friends." "Me too. Shall we go then?" Anna and I continued our long-overdue chat over drinks. We had endless stories from college days to now, becoming in-laws, parting ways, and deepening our bonds in such a fascinating way. I'm now enjoying my life, having forgotten all about Thomas. Life without his troubles feels surprisingly carefree. I've managed to get my freelance work on track and am living quite satisfactorily. I'm no longer living at my parents' house, but enjoying my first solo living experience. Initially, my parents contacted me every day, worried, but now the frequency has decreased, and we've found the right balance. Sometimes I still ponder what that past was all about, but it's pointless to dwell on it. I want to cherish my fulfilling life now.
Stepping out of the cab, I took a deep breath, the familiar scent of freshly cut grass and blooming magnolias filling my lungs. The quaint streets of my hometown hadn't changed a bit, but I wasn't the same wide-eyed girl who had left a decade ago, full of dreams and ambition. My heart sank as I approached Aunt Margot's porch. This was supposed to be a temporary refuge, but the words I overheard through the screen door shattered any illusion of a warm welcome. "Can't believe she had the nerve to show up here after everything." Margot's shrill voice carried like nails on a chalkboard. Her mother would be so disappointed. "Don't worry, Mom," Beckett chimed in, his tone laced with poorly concealed glee. "We'll make sure she doesn't overstay her welcome." The screen door creaked open, and Margot's beady eyes locked onto mine. A sickly sweet smile stretched across her wrinkled face, but the look she gave me could curdle milk. Well, if it isn't the prodigal niece returning. I mustered a polite nod, swallowing the bitter retort on my tongue. "Aunt Margot, thank you for having me." "Don't thank me yet, dear," she sneered, ushering me inside with a bony hand. "You'll be earning your keep around here." Beckett emerged from the living room, his condescending smirk doing little to mask the jealousy that flickered in his eyes whenever he looked at me. "Hey, cuz, long time no see." He pulled me into an unwanted hug, his grip lingering a little too long. "Welcome home." As I followed them into the house that had once been a sanctuary, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just stepped into a viper's nest. The game had begun, and I was the unwitting pawn in whatever twisted power play Margot and Beckett had concocted. Over the next few days, the tension was palpable. Margot treated me like an inconvenient house guest, piling on chores and deliberately excluding me from family discussions. Beckett, on the other hand, took every opportunity to mock my recent struggles, reveling in my misfortunes with a twisted sense of schadenfreude. "Heard you got canned from that fancy job of yours," he sneered one morning over coffee. "Guess the big city wasn't ready for your talents." I clenched my jaw, determined not to take the bait. It wasn't a good fit. I'm just grateful to have a chance to regroup here. Beckett let out a scornful laugh. "Yeah, good luck with that. This town has a long memory, and you're the black sheep of the family now." His words stung, but I refused to show it. I had come too far to let their petty mind games break me. This was my home, my family, and I wasn't about to let them take that away from me without a fight. As I lay awake that night, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars still clinging to my childhood ceiling, I made a silent vow. No matter what games Margot and Beckett were playing, I would unravel their twisted web of lies and deceit. The road ahead might be treacherous, but I was done running. It was time to face the storm head-on and reclaim what was rightfully mine. A week had passed since my unwelcome homecoming, and Margot's disdain showed no signs of waning. Every morning, she would greet me with a fresh list of chores, her lips curled into a sneer as she inspected my work with a critical eye. "Honestly, Raina, is this the best you can do?" she sneered one afternoon, pointing at a smudge on the kitchen counter. "No wonder you can't hold down a job." Before I could respond, Beckett sauntered in, that infuriating smirk plastered across his face. "Give the girl a break, Mom. She's just not cut out for real work." My fists clenched at my sides, but I bit my tongue. Losing my cool was exactly what they wanted. Later that week, I finally secured a job at the local boutique, desperate for any excuse to get out of that suffocating house. But even that small victory was short-lived. Well, if it isn't the failed city girl," Beckett sneered when I shared the news. "Bet you'll be real popular working retail with all your fancy degrees." Margot clucked her tongue disapprovingly. "Just don't go getting any ideas, dear. This is a temporary arrangement until you get back on your feet." The implied message was clear. I was nothing more than a charity case in their eyes, a burden to be tolerated until I could be sent on my way. At work, whispers seemed to follow me everywhere I went. Former friends and classmates watched me with a mixture of pity and schadenfreude, no doubt regaling each other with tales of my spectacular downfall. "Hey, Raina, heard you lost your big-shot job in the city," one of my old high school friends, Kendra, said with a saccharine smile. "That's too bad. I always knew you'd end up right back where you started." I forced a polite smile, my cheeks burning with humiliation. "Just taking a little break, that's all. Sometimes you need to recharge your batteries." Kendra's laugh was like nails on a chalkboard. "Well, good luck with that. This town has a way of trapping people, you know." As the days wore on, the isolation wore me down. Everywhere I turned, I was met with snide remarks or cold shoulders. Even mundane trips to the grocery store became exercises in avoiding judgmental stares and whispered barbs. It didn't take long to realize that Beckett was behind it all, spinning a twisted web of lies and rumors to alienate me from what few allies I had left in this town. My sordid, big-city misadventures became fodder for the local gossip mill, each story more outlandish than the last. It was clear that Margot and Beckett saw me as an intruder, a threat to be neutralized before I could regain my footing. And as the walls closed in around me, I knew I had two choices: wither away in their poisonous shadow, or fight back with everything I had. One sleepless night, as I stared at the shadows dancing across my childhood bedroom walls, the path forward became clear. If Margot and Beckett wanted a war, they would get one. It was time to stop playing by their rules and expose their twisted charade for what it truly was. The battle lines had been drawn, and I would show no mercy. "You're selling Grandma's land?" I fought to keep my voice steady, my fingers digging into the worn wood. The property she wanted preserved as a community park? Margot's expression was one of cold indifference. "It's a prime piece of real estate, and we could use the money, unless you'd like to start contributing to this household?" My mouth opened, then closed as 1,000 retorts battled on my tongue. Before I could formulate a response, Beckett swaggered into the room, cutting me off with a condescending laugh. "Why so shocked, cuz? Did you really think that scrap of land was yours?" His eyes glinted with malice. "Face it, you're just a guest here. A guest with no real stake in this family's legacy." White-hot anger flooded my veins as his implication hit home. In their eyes, I was nothing more than a rat scurrying through the walls of their home, to be exterminated or starved out at their whim. "How dare you?" I seethed, rising from my chair. "That land belongs to me as much as—" "Enough!" Margot's voice cracked like a whip, freezing me in place. "I've indulged your delusions long enough, Raina. This is my house, my rules." Her cold stare bored into me, daring me to challenge her authority. For a fleeting moment, I saw the twisted game she was playing, a cruel power trip designed to strip me of any semblance of dignity or autonomy. "I'm giving you a choice," she continued, her tone edged with venom. "You can accept your place as a subordinate under my roof, or you can take your chances out there." A gnarled finger jutted towards the door, the implication clear. Beckett leaned back against the counter, a smug grin plastered on his face as he savored my humiliation. Without uttering a word, he had made his allegiance known. Turn against me or face the consequences. A kaleidoscope of emotions swirled within me. Rage, humiliation, desperation. This was supposed to be a sanctuary, a temporary respite where I could regroup and find my footing. Now the walls seemed to be closing in, leaving me cornered by those I should have been able to trust above all others. I opened my mouth, fully prepared to unleash the torrent of pent-up anger and resentment that threatened to consume me from within. But something made me pause, the ember of a newfound determination flickering to life. Fine, I managed through gritted teeth, reining in my explosive emotions. You want to play hardball? Game on. Without another word, I turned on my heel and stormed out of the kitchen, my mind already racing with the beginnings of a counterattack. If Margot and Beckett thought they could bully me into submission, they were sorely mistaken. I refused to be the victim any longer. From that moment on, the battle lines were drawn in earnest. I became a silent observer, committing every underhanded comment and manipulative tactic to memory. Slowly but surely, I began assembling the pieces of the puzzle, the true depths of their depravity taking shape. They wanted to strip me of my family legacy? Fine. I would rebuild an empire from the ashes, one that would make the name Mercer something to be feared and respected once again. And when the dust finally settled, there would be a reckoning. That twisted game of theirs was just getting started. In the weeks following Margot's ultimatum, an uneasy truce settled over the household. Beckett continued his petty needling, making snide comments whenever our paths crossed, but I met his barbs with stony silence, refusing to give him the satisfaction of a reaction. "What's the matter, cuz?" he sneered one morning as I grabbed my keys. "City life finally catch up with you?" I brushed past him without a word, his taunts falling on deaf ears. I had bigger fish to fry. My days soon settled into a methodical routine, work at the boutique, followed by clandestine meetings and information gathering. Slowly but surely, I began piecing together the true scope of Beckett's misdeeds in this town. First, there were the underhanded business deals, greasing palms to secure municipal contracts that should have gone to more reputable firms. Then came the whispers of more insidious acts, bribery, extortion, even allegations of fraud. Beckett's been running this town's underbelly for years. An old friend from high school confided over drinks one night. Anybody who gets in his way tends to have some bad luck. My blood ran cold at the implication, but I pressed on, making careful note of every scrap of intel. If I was going to bring these snakes down, I needed an airtight case. As my web of contacts grew, so too did the risks. I soon found myself navigating a minefield of shifting loyalties and interests, never quite sure who could be trusted. "Be careful who you talk to, Raina," Kendra, my coworker, warned after I broached the subject of Beckett's activities. "This town has eyes and ears everywhere. You don't want to end up on the wrong side." Her words struck a nerve, forcing me to confront the harsh reality that I was waging this war on enemy territory. One misstep could unravel everything I'd worked so hard for. But I was committed to seeing this through, no matter the cost. Gradually, the exhaustion of maintaining a double life began to weigh on me. There were nights where I would lie awake, replaying every potentially incriminating interaction in my mind, second-guessing my every move. I knew Beckett was watching, waiting for any sign of weakness to exploit. And Margot, while keeping her distance, radiated a palpable sense of smug superiority that grated on my nerves. It all came to a head one fateful evening over a stilted family dinner. As I picked at the overcooked meatloaf before me, Beckett broke the tense silence with a barrage of snide remarks. "You've been awfully scarce lately, Raina," he said, his voice dripping with false concern. "Not getting into any trouble out there, are you?" Margot pursed her lips, but said nothing, her gaze boring into me with a silent dare to challenge her son's authority. That was the final straw. In a split-second decision, I reached into my purse and retrieved the meticulous file I had compiled, detailed records of Beckett's shady dealings, eyewitness accounts, even grainy photos of him exchanging illicit packages. "You want to know what kind of trouble I've been getting into?" I growled, slamming the dossier onto the table with a resounding thud. "Take a look for yourself." Beckett's cocky smirk faltered as he flipped through the damning evidence. For the first time since my return, I held all the power. "What is this?" Margot hissed, her bony fingers wrapping around the file like talons. My gaze was steely as I leaned back, letting the weight of her son's transgressions sink in. "Your perfect little prince has been running this town into the ground," I said, relishing the words. But not for much longer. The game was on, and this time I held all the cards. The annual Mercer family gathering was always a tense affair, but this year's event carried an electric undercurrent of anticipation. As I stepped into the backyard, dozens of judgmental eyes fell upon me. Aunts, uncles, and cousins all whispering behind cupped hands. Beckett wasted no time in making his presence known, swaggering over with a wolfish grin. Well, if it isn't the black sheep herself, gracing us with her presence. I met his gaze, unflinching. "Don't worry, cousin. I'll be on my best behavior." Before he could respond, Margot's shrill voice cut through the din like a rusted knife. "Everyone, please take your seats. We have much to discuss." As the family assembled around the weathered picnic tables, Beckett made a show of pulling out his mother's chair, reveling in the approving murmurs that rippled through the crowd. I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. The performance was just another ploy to solidify his position at Margot's side. "Now, as you all know, our annual gathering isn't just about reminiscing," Margot began, her steely gaze sweeping across the assembled faces. "It's also a time to discuss the future of our family's legacy." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught Beckett's smug smile, the unspoken message clear. He expected to be named the heir apparent, the keeper of the Mercer family flame. This was my moment. "Before we proceed," I interjected, rising from my seat, "there's something you all should know about our esteemed cousin Beckett." A hush fell over the crowd as I produced the incriminating dossier, letting it fall upon the table with a dull thud. It would seem our family's legacy isn't quite as pristine as we've been led to believe. Beckett's eyes widened in panic as I laid bare the sordid details, shady business deals, extortion, even implications of more violent criminal ties. A cacophony of gasps and muttered disbelief echoed through the backyard as I exposed every last dirty secret. "You lying bye." Beckett lunged towards me, only to be restrained by two burly uncles. Margot remained motionless, her face drained of color as the stark reality of her son's transgressions sank in. In the ensuing chaos, I locked eyes with my aunt, allowing the faintest hint of a smile to crease my lips. "You wanted the truth, Margot? Well, here it is in all its sordid glory." Her jaw clenched, but she said nothing, powerless in the face of such overwhelming evidence. As the family erupted in heated argument, I stepped back, reveling in the implosion of their carefully curated facade. The reckoning had begun. In the aftermath of the family gathering, the fractures that had been laid bare only deepened. Beckett's web of criminal dealings unraveled at a dizzying pace as the local authorities pounced, emboldened by the evidence I had provided. Within days, he found himself under investigation, his assets frozen and a cloud of suspicion hanging over every business venture he had touched. The once smug prince had become a pariah, his name reviled from every corner of the town he had exploited. And Margot? Her fall from grace was just as precipitous. As the matriarch who had turned a blind eye to her son's misdeeds, she became a social outcast, shunned by the very people who had once fawned over her every move. It was almost impressive how quickly the tide had turned. One moment, they were the revered pillars of our community. The next, they were untouchables, radioactive figures to be avoided at all costs. I, meanwhile, found myself thrust into an unlikely position of power. With Beckett's criminal empire in shambles, someone had to step in and salvage what remained of our family's legitimate business interests. And in the eyes of many, I was the only Mercer untainted by scandal. It wasn't a mantle I accepted lightly. Part of me still harbored doubts, wondering if I was truly cut out to lead in the wake of such turmoil. But as I surveyed the wreckage left behind by Beckett's greed, I knew I had no choice but to try. My first order of business was damage control, auditing every deal, every partnership, and severing ties with anyone even remotely connected to Beckett's illegal activities. It was a grueling process, made all the more difficult by the lingering stench of mistrust that permeated every interaction. "How can we be sure you're not just another snake in the grass?" one skeptical investor accused during a tense meeting. "You Mercers have a talent for betrayal, it seems." I bit back the angry retort that danced on my tongue, forcing myself to remain composed. "I'm well aware of the challenges ahead, but I'm committed to righting the wrongs of the past. This family's legacy deserves better." It was a hard-fought battle, but slowly, brick by brick, I began rebuilding our reputation from the ashes. Shady deals were terminated, criminal associates were cut loose, and a new culture of transparency took root. All the while, Margot remained conspicuously absent, holed up in her dilapidated home like a wounded animal. Part of me wondered if she would ever emerge, or if the humiliation of her son's downfall had finally broken her indomitable spirit. That question was answered one dreary afternoon when I returned home from the office to find her skeletal figure hunched on my doorstep, eyes downcast. I don't know what to say," she murmured as I approached, her voice a ragged whisper of its former authoritative tone. Part of me wanted to revel in her suffering, to exact the ultimate revenge for all the pain and anguish she had inflicted. But as I studied her shrunken form, something cold and hard twisted in my gut. Pity. With a resigned sigh, I unlocked the door, holding it open in silent invitation. Margot looked up at me, her eyes glistening with unshed tears of shame and relief. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. With Beckett disgraced and facing potential criminal charges, I turned my attention to the next battle, securing my rightful inheritance. Grandma's cherished plot of land, the one Margot had so casually tried to sell off, would be the first step in restoring the Mercer family legacy. But negotiating with my aunt in the wake of her son's downfall proved to be a delicate dance. "I don't know what you want from me," Margot muttered, slumped in the chair across from my desk like a broken marionette. "You've taken everything else." I fought back the urge to roll my eyes at her melodramatics. "Don't play the victim, Margot. This is about making things right." Her gaze hardened, a flicker of her old defiance shining through. "By taking that land? Ripping away the last scrap of dignity I have left?" "It was never yours to sell in the first place," I countered, sliding a sheaf of documents across the desk. "Grandma's will clearly states that the property belongs to me upon her passing." Margot's bony fingers trembled as she flipped through the pages, the damning legal language staring back at her. For a fleeting moment, I almost felt a pang of pity for the broken woman before me. Almost. "You can't do this," she whispered, desperation creeping into her voice. "That land is all I have left." I leaned back, fixing her with a level stare. "Actually, you have a choice. The property becomes a community park as Grandma intended, under my stewardship, or you fight me on this and lose everything." Her shoulders slumped in defeat as the weight of her circumstances finally sank in. Any legal challenge she mounted would be quashed, her reputation too tarnished to gain any traction. Margot was well and truly boxed into a corner of my making. "Fine," she growled through gritted teeth. "Take your damn park. But don't think for 1 second that I'll ever forgive you for this." A thin smile played across my lips as I slid the contract across the desk, reveling in her impotent fury. "I'm not asking for your forgiveness, Margot. Just your compliance." As her gnarled hand trembled over the dotted line, I allowed myself a moment of vindication. The first chess piece had fallen into place. Over the next few months, I steadily consolidated my hold over the family's interests. One by one, the remaining assets trickled under my control as Margot's influence withered and died. Even Beckett's last flailing attempts to cling to power were rendered moot as the legal walls closed in around him. By the end of that turbulent first year, I stood at the apex, overseeing the resurrection of the Mercer Empire from the ashes of deceit and betrayal. It was an empire built on transparency, integrity, everything those snakes had once lacked. The true test, however, came with the groundbreaking ceremony for Grandma's community park. As I stood before the assembled crowd, I couldn't help but bask in the moment, relishing the look of barely contained fury etched onto Margot's face. This was my legacy, my crowning achievement, and she could do nothing but watch as the culmination of her failures played out before her. "Today marks a new dawn for our town," I proclaimed, my voice carrying over the hushed gathering. "A green space where families can come together, unburdened by the sins of the past." I paused, letting my gaze settle on Margot with a pointed stare. Those driven by greed and malice would seek to spoil this gift, to defile its sacred purpose. But their pernicious influence has been purged, allowing this spirit of community to take root and thrive. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd, and I could see the anger simmering behind Margot's eyes. This was the ultimate humiliation, and we both knew it. As the ceremonial first shovel broke ground, I felt an immense sense of catharsis wash over me. The turnaround, so many years in the making, was finally complete. Beckett's star had fallen, Margot's reign of toxicity had ended, and in their place a new order was born, one built on the ideals Grandma had embodied, the true heart of our family's legacy. It was everything they had once sought to deny me. And I had seized it through resilience, determination, and a heaping dose of hard-earned karma. In the months that followed the opening of Grandma's park, Oakville settled into an era of rebirth and renewal. The open space quickly became a beloved gathering place, a verdant oasis in the heart of our humble town. I lost track of how many times parents approached me, eyes shining with gratitude as their kids frolicked on the playground equipment or kicked a ball across the lush greenery. "Thank you for doing this," they would murmur, their words carrying a depth of emotion that no business success could ever match. Our community deserves this. As for Margot, our relationship remained frosty at best. She avoided public outings, electing to shroud herself in self-imposed exile rather than face the prying eyes of those who had witnessed her spectacular fall. Part of me couldn't help but feel a twinge of remorse at how events had unfolded. For all her faults, she was still family, still the woman who had once been a second mother to me during those halcyon childhood summers. But the scars ran too deep, the specter of betrayal casting a pall over any hint of reconciliation. We crossed paths only when strictly necessary, the occasional terse meeting to discuss residual family matters or legal obligations. Our barbed exchanges were a twisted dance, each of us probing for weaknesses and finding none. At least that's how it was, until the day she showed up unannounced on my front step. "We need to talk," Margot murmured, her eyes downcast as she invited herself into my living room. I tensed, readying myself for whatever fresh salvo of resentment she planned to unleash. But the venom never came. Instead, she regarded me with a look that could almost be mistaken for wistfulness, her usual imperiousness conspicuously absent. "I did some thinking while I was away," she began, worrying her hands in her lap, "about the path that led us here, the choices I made that put my priorities in the wrong place." I said nothing, but my eyebrow arched ever so slightly, coaxing her to continue. "What I'm trying to say is—" She faltered, visibly struggling to force the words out. "I was wrong, Raina, about everything." The admission hung in the air, so unexpected and uncharacteristic that I found myself temporarily stunned into silence. This was the indomitable Margot Mercer, a proud, vindictive woman, admitting fault, apologizing. "I don't expect your forgiveness," she pressed on, her voice strained. "I know I squandered any chance at that a long time ago, but I owe you this reckoning, I suppose." I opened my mouth, then closed it, feeling uncharacteristically unmoored by her contrition. The bitterness still lingered, as potent as ever, but after so many years of hostility and rancor, this olive branch, however belated, represented a chance to finally exorcise the demons of our shared history. "Thank you," I said at last, the words tasting unfamiliar on my tongue when directed at her, "for acknowledging that, at least." Margot nodded, her eyes glistening with something resembling remorse. We both knew that this wasn't forgiveness, nor even the start of rebuilding what had been shattered beyond repair. But it was a start, however small and fragile. A chance to shed the burdens of the past and move forward, unburdened by the recriminations and deceits that had poisoned our family tree for far too long. As she stood to leave, I found myself struck by how diminished she seemed. A husk of the imperious, cunning woman whose shadow had loomed over my life for so many years. In her place was someone human. Flawed, yes, but finally awakened to the consequences of her own sins. Perhaps that realization, however belated, could serve as the foundation for a new era in the Mercer family legacy. One where integrity and accountability took precedence over ambition and greed. Or perhaps it was merely the first step in a long, arduous road towards personal redemption for us both. Only time would tell. But as I watched Margot's withered form disappear into the fading summer dusk, I felt an unshakable sense of purpose settle over me like a warm embrace. The storm had passed, the monsters had been vanquished, and in their wake the path towards healing, for me, for this town, for the rightful legacy we all deserved, could finally begin.